Chainsaws, headshots and explosions. God, I love Gears of War. Wait, it's just Gears now, isn't it? Anyway, Gears 5 has arrived. And I know people like to mock these games because of their big meaty thick boy character designs, excessive violence, and general over the top masculine nature, but I'll always have a soft spot for this kind of insanity. I'm Luke, and here's my review of Gears of... Wait, no. It's Gears 5.
Hey, down in front! Throwing flag!
Following up on the events of Gears 4, in Gears 5 the COG are now fully engaged in a war with the newly reborn form of the Locust known as the Swarm. Our previous heroes, JD, Kait and Del, have all joined the COG full time and are fighting back with everything they have. The problem is that Kait has been experiencing intense headaches and visions. And after fighting off an assault in a remote outsider village, Kait finally snaps and decides she needs to find the truth behind these visions. So this time around our adventure focuses on Kait, accompanied by Del and our new little robot friend Jack as they try to figure out just what's happening to Kait. The adventure takes them through snow-covered mountains and former UIR territory in search of some answers. And truth be told, I feel like Gears 4 was mostly about Kait anyway, since it centred on trying to find her mother who'd been kidnapped by the Swarm. So it's good to see the Coalition put more focus on her anyway, especially since the end of Gears 4 seemed to heavily imply something pretty crazy about her ancestry. Because perhaps this is the strongest element of Gears 5's story. It finally feels like they're trying to bring all the lore together and actually build a world around Gears. There's plenty of lore, stuff like the Pendulum Wars, the early hours of Emergence Day and other parts of this universe that feel like they've barely been explored in game. And maybe my favourite part of the story is that Gears 5 finally seems to dig into the shadier side of the COG. We kind of saw this in Gears 4 with references to what seemed like a forced impregnation program, and in Gears 5 we dive headfirst into the shadows of the COG and get some pretty interesting bits of information that explain the origins of the Locust, and even a bit about the Locust Queen herself. Hell, it starts to make you wonder if the COG are really the good guys, and what would have happened if the UIR won the Pendulum Wars that happened before the Locust attacked. But this time around, Gears 5 trades the usually more linear campaign for some minor open world exploration. You travel around using a vehicle known as a skiff, with occasional little side quests that can be found in the worlds. Look, I know perhaps I'm just grumbling here, but open worlds are really tiring to me, and Gears 5's open world seems the same. It just feels pointless. It doesn't really add anything to the campaign other than feeling like some kind of artificial lengthening, and it just kind of screws with the pacing of everything. And the side quests themselves aren't much to shake a stick at either. They just involve going to a few different locations, fighting off some Locust, and then once you complete them you might get a special upgrade for Jack, your little robot buddy. Because this time around Jack isn't just your helpful little door opener, but he has abilities to support you in combat. These range from scanning an area and marking enemies, being able to blind them with a flash, make you invisible, or even make you temporarily invincible. You acquire the upgrades throughout the story and then you upgrade them with components that you'll find while progressing through the story, and I found myself using it quite a lot. However, I mostly just used the flash attack and temporary invincibility known as stim, mainly because the flash left them vulnerable to a good old fashioned headshot.
Jack flash!
Despite the weird open world stuff and the way it messes up the pacing, this is Gears gameplay as good as it's ever been. Tight, responsive controls combined with fast and intense cover-based shootouts make for a great time as always. All the classic guns return and there's a few new weapons to play with, but honestly I still feel like the armory is lacking. It just feels like they aren't taking any risks when it comes to the firepower, which to me was one of early Gears of War's biggest strengths. We had tons of weapons like the Digger, the Scorcher and other options like the Shield. Weapons and items that just had unique functions. Gears 4 didn't really shake up the arsenal and it feels like Gears 5 has the same problem. New weapons include a Lancer assault rifle with a grenade launcher instead of a chainsaw, an LMG that gets more accurate the longer you fire it, or a new melee weapon called the Breaker Mace. And even then we've had melee centric weapons before like the Cleaver in Gears 3. I still enjoyed the campaign though. The story's really interesting and I really enjoyed the work they did to start finally putting all the different pieces of the Gears universe together. And there's still some good old-fashioned banter between the characters between shootouts, however Gears does use the survive this enemy assault until the door gets opened trope just one too many times. So let's move on to Escape, a new co-op mode in which a squad of 3 players known as Hive Busters deliberately surrender themselves to a carrier. Then they're transported to a hive, at which point they break free, set a toxic bomb and proceed to quickly escape from said hive. Escape trades the usually more carefully paced nature of the campaign for a more hectic and desperate rush. The bomb goes off after 60 seconds, and the toxin inside slowly begins to fill the hive as you and your squad look to escape, fighting your way through swarm and corrupted DBs to quickly escape the hive. The truth is that I didn't really feel that pressure to escape quickly though. I mean, time-wise the toxin moves really slowly, so the main pressure stems from fighting enemies with limited supplies and ammos. You only start with a pistol and the weapons and ammo you gather are pretty low, so it's important to make your shots count. The problem is that some enemies just feel unreasonably spongy, especially at high difficulties when it feels like your ammo is barely having an effect, so just running around them is your best option, and then you hope whatever resistance you face afterwards will actually take damage from your shots. I feel like this mode would work a lot better if you face a lot of enemies that took less damage than fewer enemies that took loads of damage. I mean, you're in a swarm hive, so surely it should be filled to the brim with enemies, right? It feels so barely populated and empty that I wonder if the effort of destroying it is even really worth it. And then once you reach the outside, you set the final blast doors to shut and fight off a final wave of rushing enemies, but even at the big finish it still feels pretty calm. And once the doors shut, you just finish any enemies that go out and we're done. Escape just feels empty. It feels like it's lacking that intensity that it's supposed to have. It just doesn't feel like there's enough on the player to keep them moving, and the constant lack of supplies contrasted with spongy and tanky enemies just feels irritating and cheap. Next we come to Horde mode. Up to 5 players team up to fight off 50 waves of enemies using a combination of firepower and fortifications. Truth is, I've always had mixed feelings about Horde across Gears. While I love the core gunplay of Gears, the idea of fighting 50 waves of enemies with no break has just never appealed to me. Especially since Horde mode does little to shake things up or keep you on your toes. After every 10 waves it just adds a random modifier like increasing enemy health or damage, or something else that just makes the later waves more tiring to fight. I like the fortification elements and the class based stuff, although it kind of frustrates me that in Gears 5 you now can't have 2 people playing as the same class in Horde. It's a co-op PvE mode, and this is where you don't want to allow duplicate classes. It's especially confusing decision since they allow duplicate classes in the new arcade versus mode. Wait, so let's go back a sec. Arcade mode is a new twist on Gears versus modes. Arcade trades the usual arena-esque elements of Gears versus for a class-based mode. You start off by choosing your character, each has a couple of abilities and minor differences in their starting loadout. Then, as you earn kills during the game, you use those to acquire new weapons, and each character has a specific set of weapons that they can acquire with their points, from shotguns to explosive weapons to other stuff. Okay, so this might be a PC specific problem, but in my experience, arcade matches are almost entirely dominated by snipers. Unlike Horde mode, there's no limitations on who can play as the same character. And so, every arcade match just becomes everybody playing snipers, and then fighting for the high ground until one team has complete dominance over the whole map. From this point, it just becomes a tedious game of hopefully finding any way to kick them off the high ground. But when there's 3 to 4 different players all armed with sniper rifles up there, good luck getting anywhere near it. But then again, arcade mode might not be for veteran Gears players like me. In interviews for Gears 5, the Coalition studio head Rod Ferguson talks about the challenges they face trying to make Gears 5 appeal to newcomers, especially since they'd attract a lot more players through the Game Pass system. So I guess arcade mode is for the new players who might be surprised by the way Gears Versus normally works. Because Gears Versus modes have always been its main appeal for me. I've been a die-hard Gears fan since the first game back in 2006. The fast and brutal nature of the game, as well as its unpredictability when it comes to weapon pickups, has never lost its appeal, and in Gears 5, it's almost as good as it's ever been. Let me preface this by saying firstly, I still love it. Gears 5 Versus is fantastic, and everything I love is still there. It's just that I feel even less compelled to go for the weapon pickups on most maps than usual, in part because it feels like there's even less variety in some maps. Most maps will have grenades and pistols, but all the other pickups just vary in ways that feel kind of inconsistent. And weapons like the Enforcer and the M-Bar just aren't that interesting to use, and it feels like they're on every map. Power weapons like the Boom Shot or even the Long Shot are the kind of weapons that shake things up and force players to change up tactics when someone is on the loose with them, yet it feels like they're barely around. And the weapons they alternate with just feel really random. On one map, the Long Shot, which is a sniper rifle, swaps with the Enforcer, an SMG, and I don't know where they got that from. Why not swap it with a Markser? The variety of weapons on maps at the moment just feels really limited, and I can't say I've seen stuff like the Torque Bow either, and that's a weapon that can easily strike fear into other players when they hear it winding up. Yet Gears 5 does preserve one of the core foundations of Gears Versus, the almighty Nasher shotgun.
Coming!
Anyone who's ever played Gears Versus knows just how devastating this thing is. It's pretty much dominated the versus scene ever since the first game, and it's just as brutal as ever. National duels are still a thrilling and satisfying encounter every time, whenever you and a foe are circling around cover, looking for your chance to strike. And as with Gears tradition, the maps are often small, symmetrical, and centre on choke points that feature chaotic gunfights as both teams look to assert their dominance. These maps aren't quite as memorable, and more surprisingly, they didn't bring back Gridlock, which has always been one of the most popular maps in Gears. However, the Coalition have promised to support Gears with free content, so I can assume it won't be that long until we're spraying the streets of Gridlock in blood and body parts again. But free content, huh? What's the catch? Oh yeah, there's a premium currency. Iron, it's called, and it's mostly used for cosmetic items, but I still don't like it. Maybe I shouldn't moan as much since I get to play Gears through the Game Pass, but I still don't like this kind of stuff in AAA games. The other main use I've seen for it is it goes with the game's Battle Pass system known as Tours. While you have a character rank, there's a lot of customization options that might be locked to Tours, and progressing through Tours uses a challenges and stars system which seems really limited. You get 3 challenges each day, complete them, and you have to wait until the next day to get new ones, unless you're willing to spend iron to buy new ones straight away. I can't help but feel cynical about this system since it feels like it's a way to capitalise and monetise impatience. If we can't wait for the next day, then we use premium currency to buy more challenges, and that kind of just doesn't sit right with me. Perhaps it's just because I long for the days of Gears 3's progression system, which was about as close to perfect as I think we've ever gotten. Gears 3 just had clear, fair and achievable requirements. You want that Marcus skin? Cool, you just need to reach level 20. In Gears 5, you want that Desert Fast skin? Okay, well you need to reach this rank on the current tour. To do that, you need to complete daily challenges to earn stars, but you only have 3 a day unless you're willing to spend premium currency to get more, or grind like crazy to do these really demanding medal challenges like get 1,000 kills in 2 weeks. The grind just seems like a bit much, is what I'm saying. Reading back over this review, I feel like I'm moaning a lot. That being said, I still recommend Gears 5. I enjoyed the campaign despite the open world elements kind of screwing up the pacing of everything, but the versus mode is still fantastic and I'm not sure I could ever stop loving Gears. So that's my review of Gears 5. Here on GameLuster, thanks for watching, please subscribe to the channel and check out the website for more content. Thank you very much.